just when you have your
I feel the exact same way. Sometimes I'll put a piece of tape over my computer screen. You're on my phone right now, but sometimes if I'm like,
I know what you mean. I know what you mean. Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to Chef AJ Live. I'm your host, Chef AJ, and this is where I introduce you to amazing people like you who are doing great things in the world that I think you should know about. Today's guest is going to be making a wonderful recipe. They're called Earl Grey scones from her new book, Think Outside the Lunchbox. Her name is Ashley Arpel Greenwald. Please welcome her to the show. It's very nice meeting you.
Hi, thank you for having me. Hello, everybody.
Well, I'm so excited because this sounds like a wonderful recipe. But before we get started with the recipe, let's get to know you a little bit. Who are you? Where the heck did you come out from? And how did you become plant-based?
Sure. Yeah. Well, I am Ashley. A little bit about me. I'm an actress as well as a TV host and chef. In the acting world, I tend to steer more towards, comedy. In the chef world, I would say I am an avid cupcake eater and baker. I do not discriminate. I'm an equal opportunist cupcake connoisseur, if you will. And actually, funny enough, the way I got into cupcake baking was coming up with a plant-based frosting. There's not many options out there, but I have them, and many of which are in this book.
Well, how long have you been plant-based, and what drew you to it?
Yeah, well, I opened my bakery, I want to say, without giving away my age, about 6.5 to almost, 6.5 years ago. And I was not plant-based at the time, though I was offering vegan and gluten-free options. And really, it wasn't until I met Jill Steinbach, who is my co-author and my fiance's mother. So things really can't go wrong there. We're in business together now. My co-author, that's Jill right there, for Think Outside the Lunchbox, our cookbook. It wasn't really until I met her that I sort of understood the difference between the lifestyle I was leading and the healthy lifestyle that I wanted to lead. And within the plant-based network and community, I was able to adopt certain cooking methods and baking methods, which ultimately led me to a healthier living and just eating experience. So let's see, I met Jill about 3 years ago. So that's how long it's been, 3.5 years ago, maybe. I have to think back to when my anniversary is, and then I'll have the exact date for you.
Well, that's terrific. And then you guys wrote a book together. That's neat.
Yeah, it was funny. About 6 months of knowing her, we got along instantly. And then she just said, she has about 10 cookbooks out, not including this one. So when she asked me to come on board, I was just chomping at the bit. I really wanted to get involved. So this is my first cookbook of many. And I'm really happy that it's so niche. We put on the cover plant nutritious, which means to us that 100% plant-based. So nothing, no chemicals, no granulated sugar. We have very few ingredients that actually include all-purpose flour or whole wheat flour. All of the flours you see here is made from nuts or oats or rice. So it's just a lot. Personally, I feel as though so many of my friends say, wow, that must be so difficult for you to have to find alternatives to regular ingredients. And it's actually a lot easier. I mean, once you know, you know. So it's a lot easier for me to come up with recipes and bake now that I know how to do it, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, I didn't realize Jill had 10 books. Why the heck isn't she coming on the show?
I know, right? She's stage shy. So maybe, you know what? Maybe you and I can coerce her.
Maybe you guys could do a presentation together.
Oh, I would love that.
Yeah.
We're fun. When we're in the kitchen together, it's very, very fun. When we were, so I photographed most of the food photos in this book. And when we were in the kitchen just plating everything, my goodness, she comes up with the funniest random jokes. Like the oddest times. You know what? When she's on your show, you'll see. She can be very funny.
Well, I can't wait to meet her.
Yeah, she's amazing.
Yeah. So this recipe is in the book, and I'm going to post the link in the show notes and also in the chat where people can get it on Amazon.
Oh,
and
great.
You were kind enough to give us the recipe, so they'll be posted very soon in the show notes as well.
Oh, good. Yes, this is actually, so funny enough, this was one of the first recipes I wrote for the book. And the great thing about this recipe is that it's very versatile. So the Earl Grey, obviously that's what gives gives these scones its flavor, or their flavor, excuse me. But that means you can use any tea. I mean, it doesn't have to be Earl Grey. That was what I wrote it with, but I've done it. We also, in the book, there are chai chocolate scones, and that's in our chocolate section. English breakfast scones for breakfast or any time of the day. You can virtually use any tea that you love. So for me, I think I've made them at least 12 different ways with, I mean, there's endless amounts of tea out there. So yeah, this is one of my very favorite. I'll show you. I will show you the scones. You have to manually make them look like scones. You know, this dough, it's very, very malleable because we're not using egg or butter or oil or granulated sugar. The only grains in here, which aren't actually, well, there is brown rice flour, which is a grain, but the rest of the flours are made out of nut. So we don't, it's actually a really fun and unique way to create a scone without it having any of the bad for you ingredients.
That's cool that it's gluten-free, because a lot of people, that's really important.
That was something I was petrified about. Going into this book, Jill and I went back and forth so many times because just because something is vegan, I mean, Oreos are vegan, but are Oreos what you really want to put into your system? You know, I mean, yes, they're vegan. They are so, I mean, nothing against Oreos. When I was a child, I loved Oreos, but you know, that's just because it's vegan doesn't mean it's healthy. And I think that's where a lot of the confusion in the world is, or in, you know, this community, the plant-based community, comes from. It's that people think, oh, well, I'm vegan, I can have Oreos, or I don't even know, I think Pringles are vegan, you know what I mean? And it's just, or even something as average as a potato chip. And people are like, oh, well, it's, you know, it's potato, so it's healthy for me. Not the case. So I wanted to come up, especially with this cookbook, but just in general, a lot of the recipes in this book, actually, we sort of transform the chocolate chip cookie, and we have a cacao cookie, and no butter, no oil, nothing, none of the bad for you ingredients. And yeah, that's something that we're really prideful about. So the gluten-free thing came in when I said to Jill, I'm nervous that people are going to want this book, but there are so many people out there that aren't just vegan, that are also gluten-free, and we have to be able to give them something like that. They have to, if there's a recipe that they may not like, that's one thing. But if they buy the book and they're like, I can't eat any of this, I am gluten-free and vegan, I'm 100% plant-based, I don't put any of that in my body, how can I even look to your book? So that was something that we really, really wanted to incorporate.
Nice. So there's a question if you could use another type of tea, and I just saw it in the chat. Amy said, could you use matcha?
Absolutely. Hi, Amy. So that's a great question, especially specifically for matcha. That I'm gonna throw that back to you and ask what kind of matcha. If you're using a matcha powder, you can absolutely do that, but we would have to do some substitutions because matcha powder is very, very thick. So it's almost, it's not a thickening agent, of course, but it can act as one when you bake it. So if you're going to use a green tea, as in a tea bag, so what I'm using Tazo Earl Grey, it's a tea bag. So I soak the water. Well, of course, I make the tea, and it's been soaking for 6 minutes at this point. But I guess I would have to know whether you're using a tea bag or matcha powder. If you're using matcha powder, I would take at least a 4th cup out of the, I would say, the almond flour, because you do, it's going to be almost unmalleable if you don't.
Great.
But that was an excellent question.
Is your fiance plant-based as well?
He is not. He is very, very healthy, but he is not 100% plant-based. I would say when we met, he was probably a healthier eater than I am. But we actually recently decided to postpone our wedding. That was originally going to happen this summer. And so at the beginning of this month, we were going on an absolutely no grain diet, all veggie diet, which meant just, we were incorporating carbs, I mean, broccoli is very high in carbs, but it is a wonderful vegetable and very high in fiber and nutrients. But we were taking out all rice, even brown rice, and oats. And that was a very strict diet that we were on. And since now we decided to postpone it, now we're using grains again. But he's very healthy, but I would say he's not 100% plant-based yet. Maybe his mom and I can nudge
I was
him.
going to say, maybe you guys can work on him, but I'm guessing you make delicious food that he probably eats.
He was my original taste tester for this book. And when we first started dating, one of my recipes in here for zoodles, it's zucchini and butternut squash noodles. I made them for him the first time I ever made them, and he said this was maybe that's why he's with me. That was his favorite recipe, and I wasn't going to include it in the book. So I was like, oh, maybe I should stick more towards baking. And he was the one that convinced me, you must put that recipe in the book. People will want it. So if you are a pasta eater, which I 100% am, you don't want all of the flour. Depending on the pasta, I mean, some of it is semolina, obviously. But if you want more of a veggie-based pasta, we have zoodles in here, and they are very yummy. I must say, I am a big fan of my zoodles as well. So
nice.
Yeah.
Well, so have you got your oven already preheated?
Oh yes, that's actually the first step is preheat your oven to 350 degrees. And then our second step is the mise en place, which I have already done as well, which I just got everything out here. It was funny when I was setting it up, when you're in your own kitchen, you're like, okay, well, I'll just reach for that and reach for this, and I don't need to have everything here. And then I thought, no, you're going to be live. You need to have everything set and perfectly placed. So before I turned on the camera, I was just scrambling, and my cat was with me. She's in another room now. Don't worry, she won't mind.
Mise en place, I think, is important, even for people at home just making dinner. It really helps speed it up.
It definitely does. It's also a lot easier when it comes to dishes, because once you set everything up, you know exactly what's needing to be cleaned afterwards, as opposed to just like dumping it, throwing it in the sink, and then you look at your sink and it's piles and piles and mounds and mounds.
I'm in the process of posting the recipe right now in the show notes. And by show notes, guys, I mean the description box under YouTube. If you're watching Facebook, unfortunately, you can't see it. And I see it calls for hazelnut meal. Now, I've heard of almond meal, but I don't think I've ever seen hazelnut meal in the stores.
Yes, so that is very difficult to find. I found mine at Whole Foods. You can find them at whatever your grocery store that resembles a health grocery store. So I'm not sure, depending on where you're based. For me, the closest is Whole Foods. For my dad, I think he's the closest to Health Nut in New York City, so. But I will say, unfortunately, in the book as well, but I have substitutions, and today I'm going to be working with a substitution because we could not find hazelnut meal. When I wrote the recipe, it was in abundance, and I think just right now, perhaps it's just not available today. But you can also make it yourself. But having said that, I don't suggest that. I mean, I'm replacing the hazelnut meal with almond meal. And what's great, they're both nuts, so I don't have to reorganize the amounts or readjust the amounts. I'm using the exact same amount. I believe my recipe calls for a half cup of hazelnut meal. I am just substituting that with a half cup of almond meal.
Great. And that's actually easy to find because you can even get that at Trader Joe's. It's pretty.
Oh, that I have found at every grocery store, whether it's a health food grocery store or just your basic average grocery mart. That is very easy to find. It's almost as easy to find as all-purpose flour. Brown rice flour is very easy to find as well at, I believe certain Trader Joe's has them, but don't quote me on that. I 100% know Whole Foods has them, as well as Kroger, which for here is Ralph's. I'm not sure what it is elsewhere. But, and I think our local Sprouts has it as well.
I love Sprouts.
Oh, I love Sprouts. That's where I get my K-Pod, the K-Cup coffee that you may or may not be seeing in the background. They have so many different flavors. I'm just like going through the aisles, grabbing them all. I'm a coffee fiend.
Well, your skin's beautiful, I can tell you that.
Oh my, thank you so much. You know, I've been, well, that I would say is water and vegetables. I don't know. I drink an obscene amount of water. That's what my fiance has gotten me into, is a lot of water drinking. So when I cut off the coffee at around 2-3 p.m., I stick to water. But thank you so much.
Well, yep, you're welcome.
That made my day. Thank you.
So what's the first step?
Okay, well, the first step, as I said, is to preheat your oven and mise en place, and I've already done all of that. So now, I'm gonna hide this so we don't get anything on it, the book. So I'll go through what I have here on the table as and a little bit before while I do this. So I have gloves because part of this recipe, you use your hands to mold the scones. You don't need to use gloves. Of course, you can use your regular hands if you just wash your hands first. But I like the gloves because I don't like all of the goo getting under my nails. So also, another first step is to make your tea. I made my tea and it's been steeping for quite some time and it smells incredible. The brand that I used to write the recipe and that I use today is Tazo. It's the one that Starbucks uses. I'll do a close-up so you can see. I don't, actually it looks too bright maybe. Can you see it? Okay. Yeah. This one is my favorite. It's very aromatic and it tastes amazing. I mean, it's almost like using an extract, but it's not. It's water and the herbs. It's amazing. So I'm going to start with the 1.5 cups of unblanched almond meal. And then, like I said, I replaced the hazelnut meal with almond meal because I could not find hazelnut meal. It's a 1/2 cup. Just pouring it in. Also, can we talk about how I matched my little, like the aesthetic that I have going on here? Oh, Jill got me these. I have to call out my little aesthetic. I'm happy about it. So every now and then I'm just gonna whisk together ingredients. I just realized I don't actually have to with that because they're the exact same thing. So this is my brown rice flour. It's 1.5 cups. It looks very light, but I promise you it is brown rice flour. And at the bottom of this bowl, I'm not sure if you can say it says eat what you love. I'm not sure if you can see that.
That's cool. Hey, Ashley, Mary has a question. What's the difference between almond meal and almond flour, or are they the same?
Virtually, they're the same. If you, I believe that almond flour is a lot more fine, and almond meal includes the outside of the almond, so it's a different color. Almond meal is a little darker, which is what I have here, and almond flour will look like the brown rice flour. It's a little lighter, and I believe it is less coarse when you touch it. Yeah. You can bake with both. It's an excellent question. You can absolutely bake with both. If a recipe calls for almond meal or almond flour, to me personally, I think of it as the exact same thing, and I always get the exact same turnout. Some people might try and fight me on that, but asking me, disregard the meal or the flour and use what your local grocery store has. Because the last thing I want people to do is try and order something crazy on Amazon for $45 when you can get it for, I don't know, maybe $4 at your local Trader Joe's. Yeah. And Trader Joe's has almond flour. I believe it actually says almond flour, whereas at Whole Foods, you will have different packages. There's almond flour, almond meal, you know, Whole Foods has a lot of different vendors there. Oh, that was a great question. I'm just whisking this together. There's absolutely no liquid in here, so it's really, really simple. I'm just making sure that I can form a little bit of a well when I do pour in the maple syrup and the tea. I mean, it's not much to look at the moment. It's just our dry ingredients. Funny enough, when I was writing this recipe, a lot of my friends that are bakers or bake quite a bit asked me why I didn't include salt, because, you know, salt is very prevalent in most, if not all, baking recipes. And when we first started to write this cookbook, we wanted to use absolutely no salt, not even salt to taste. And I believe the only salt that we used was soy sauce. And that was because it was natural. and it can come in gluten-free or not. Or I think it can come like gluten sensitive. But there's absolutely no salt in this recipe and in any of my baking recipes in this cookbook. So.
Well, I appreciate that. And I was pastry chef in an LA restaurant for 5 years and I didn't use salt. I mean, I don't know why people think it has to even be in desserts.
Yeah, it's absolutely not necessary. And it drives me crazy when people not even get offended by it, but they think, well, I can't make that recipe because there's no salt in it. You don't even know if you can't explain to me what the salt is used for, I can't take your opinion seriously. But what restaurant did you work at?
It was called Sante. It was on La Brea near Pink's Hot Dogs. And then when the owner decided to sell it, it became a German restaurant and they didn't need a pastry chef anymore.
That's unfortunate. What, is it still open, the German restaurant?
Hey, I left LA 2 years ago. I'll Google it. I honestly don't know.
Google it, please. I want to go. Well, when things open up, I do. So now that I've mixed my dry ingredients, I'm adding a half cup of pure maple syrup. This particular ingredient, I will say, is very important to me. I grew up only having 100% pure maple syrup. Well, my mom and I did. My dad and my brother would have Aunt Jemima, which is delicious, or log cabin, which is also delicious. But for this recipe, it's very important that you use pure maple syrup. There's no added sugars. It's the natural, purest form of maple syrup. It's sap, tree sap. I'm not saying that Log Cabin or Aunt Jemima or any of those other maple syrup brands are bad. I am just saying for this particular recipe, please use pure maple syrup.
Yeah, don't use like that pancake syrup that they sell in the store. That's just like.
Right. That's corn syrup and sugar. And again, I don't want to say anything negative about any other product out there. But for this recipe, I am very much stating that you should use 100% pure maple syrup, which I believe at Trader Joe's is $6.99. So, it's not a crazy ingredient. Okay, I'm moving this in a little bit. So now I'm going to add my tea. I'm going to take the tea bag out because you don't want that plopping in there. That's going to be a little difficult. So this tea, I'm going to try and tilt it so you guys can see it. It looks like coffee. I really steeped this. I would say you should steep, because you want the flavor in the Earl Grey. When you bake things and you cook things, a lot of the time it doesn't smell or taste the way it did before when it was raw. So you really, really want to incorporate the Earl Grey. And it's it smells amazing. I'm going to show you it. I mean, it looks like black coffee. Let's see. Can I tilt it without spilling? Can you see it?
A little bit, yeah.
Okay, any more and it's going to go all over my floor. But it looks like black coffee, I assure you. It smells like tea. So I'm pouring that in. Shout out to my friend Allie who got me this mug for my birthday. It says my name on it. Thank you, Allie. And now I'm going to whisk. I'm going to whisk everything. This is our pre-baked glaze that I'll go over after, so I'm not including it right now, just so everyone is aware. And I'm going to whisk it. You can use your hands for this, but there's so many in between motions that you're gonna have to do that I don't suggest using your hands to mix this. Other dough making recipes will tell you to use your hands, and I would for certain, but not for this one. So I'm whisking it. It almost looks like porridge. I don't know about you, but I love porridge too. It smells amazing. It's like it reminds me of tea time, like high tea with, I don't know, Marie Antoinette. Now every so often you're just gonna want to go like this, just bang it out a little bit with your whisk just to get all of the batter outside from within. And then just keep going. You really, really want this to mix well, because otherwise we're forming a dough ball and you're not going to be able to if you don't mix everything together, because we don't have egg in here. We don't even have any form of an egg replacement, if you will. So there's nothing, the only thing holding this together is the maple syrup and the tea. There's not even oil or butter. Okay. So here we go. Mine is mixed together. Also, one great thing about this recipe is that if for some reason you don't want to go through the motions of making scones, you can flatten these and turn them into cookies. You know, if you don't want to make them like the actual, you know, the general scone shape of it being in a triangle with the little edges, you know, you can just roll it into a dough ball, which I'll show you. I can show you that today too, but just roll it into a dough ball and just smush it, if you will, and it can be a cookie. You know, the last thing that I believe any other chef would want to do is to make things harder. But if you're having a tea party, the scones are a hit. I've made them for mine, and they've all been loved.
Ashley Fern asks, she has a nut allergy. Is there an alternative flour she can use?
That's a great question. So as of right now, she's allergic to all nuts. So even
she didn't say, but Fern, if you're still watching, maybe type if there's any nut you can have at all.
Sure, that's a great question. So we do have a lot of recipes in this book that don't incorporate nuts. This is a particular one where two of the main ingredients, hazelnut and almonds, they're nuts. So yes, there is an alternative. I don't know it yet, but I can create it for you and then get back to you, because I don't want to say something and then have it not work before I try it. So I'm sure there is an alternative. I have not created it yet.
She says she's allergic to tree nuts. So are there, I'm not really familiar with nuts. Okay. Which ones are not tree nuts? Almonds,
don't quote me. I don't believe almonds are tree nuts, but I think hazelnuts might be, but I don't want to give any information. I don't want to specifically give any information that I don't know the exact answer to. So it's an excellent question. And if I will get your information and I will attempt to create an alternative recipe.
Okay, so it said, I just Googled it. Tree nuts include almonds, Brazil nuts, cashews, hazelnuts, pecans, pistachios, and walnuts.
Okay,
an allergy to one tree nut does not necessarily mean an allergy to all of them. So the only thing that I'm not seeing on this list is macadamia.
Okay, well, macadamias are delicious. I'm not sure that I've ever seen macadamia nut flour. Or meal. So Fern, excellent question. I will absolutely do my research and try to come up with an alternative recipe for you.
What about coconut flour? Because coconut's not a nut.
Right. Yeah. I try not to bake with coconut flour that much, but I will attempt for you, Fern. For you. That's a great question, and it's actually an important question. So I will definitely do my research and get back to you, Fern.
She says she can only have peanuts, which is a legume. Is there such a thing as peanut flour?
Not that I've ever used, but fear not, we will come up with something. If not this recipe, many of the recipes in our book do not include any type of nut, let alone tree nuts. So again, fear not, we will come up with that for you, I can assure you. So I'm just going to move this out of the way for a hot second so that I can form it into a dough ball and we can start making these scones. Oh, Fern, I feel so bad. I'm so sorry. I feel like that answer wasn't what you wanted to hear. Okay. These are my gloves. So I have parchment paper here. I've used parchment. This is going to be loud. One second. Bringing up. So I have used parchment paper, but I've also used, I believe we got them at Costco, these plastic baking sheets that nothing sticks to them, and they really do work. So you can either use parchment paper, which is very easily found, or if you already have those plastic baking sheets, you can use those as well. So spread them out, spread one sheet of parchment paper, which is what I'm using, out on a flat surface. And now is where I put my gloves on. Okay. And what I'm doing is I'm using my hands to form a medium-sized dough ball in my bowl. See, it's staying still, very, very easy. Now I'm just going to scoop it up. I got it all in one scoop, one hand. I have a fistful of dough right now. It's incredible. Okay. And I'm just going to reshape it so that it is a circle, not an oval, not a square, not a triangle. Because, like I said, we are making scones today. Or we can also try to make some cookies if you want. But, like that a little bit. Okay. So now what I'm going to do, this is a really funny part. We are not using a rolling pin to flatten this out. I'm going to place a piece of parchment paper on top of my dough ball. I'm very excited for this, as you can see. And I'm taking my bowl and I am flattening out my dough, creating a very fun and exciting circle to slice our scones. I don't know why this part makes me excited. Maybe it brings me back to kindergarten or something. I don't know. Okay. And now just peeling off the parchment. And look, nothing came off with the parchment. It's completely flat here. It looks perfect. Place that there. Taking the gloves off, no longer need them at the moment. And so in my recipe, I write that you can slice these scones either with a very, very sharp knife or a pizza cutter. I've used both. Neither one is easier or harder than the other. It's just, it depends what you have right in front of you. And right now, that's not the right knife. Right now, I have this knife, so that's what I'm going to be using. So we're cutting these into wedges. You can make the wedges as large as you want. We're going to start by cutting one down the middle vertically and then horizontally. That makes 4 wedges. Now look how malleable this dough is. I can just pinch a piece off and then stick it back on if I need to. But all I'm saying is that this dough, it's very finicky, so you want to be very, very careful. So I'm going to slice it diagonally. And then again diagonally. So I made 4 scones. Now here's where you can kind of get creative. I use a fork or a knife and I just sort of pinch the back of the, like the outer area, no, I don't want to say that and get it wrong. The outer area of the circle of scones. And I just place little divots at the end. I'm not sure if you're getting that, but you don't have to do that. It's just something that I do, and you can see it on those scones when I held it up. It's just something that I like to do. But now comes the very fun kindergarten part again. So I have my pre-bake glaze. It's maple syrup and just a ½ tablespoon of water. Mix it together. And this just, you know how scones usually have a glaze, like a sugar, it's usually powdered sugar and water or powdered sugar and whole milk or something like that. Not plant-based at all. Sometimes butter is included. So this is just maple syrup and water. And we just want to have that sheen on top with a little bit of that sweetness as well. So I just use my finger and just dab it on. For these, because I've said that this dough is very, very malleable, you don't want to just sort of spread it on. That's going to rip the dough, and then you're just going to have to mold it back over. And who has time for that? Don't you want to eat these? I mean, it's 25 minutes in the oven, you know. You don't want to waste time doing it over again. So I'm just dabbing this on very, very lightly. That's why I use my fingers and not a brush. I've used brushes in the past. Before I did like plant-based baking, I would use a brush to brush on butter to like rolls and whatnot. This is very easy, very fun, and it gets the job done. And then you have this beautiful sheen when you take your scones out of the oven. And I also think it adds a little bit more of aroma because the tea smells great, but then adding maple, I don't know about you, but I'm a huge, huge candle person. So any type of aromatic scents, I like it a lot.
Dina wanted to know, could you add raisins to the scone batter?
Absolutely. So what you would do is before you formed the dough ball, you would add raisins. I believe for these, I would say a half cup of raisins will do the trick. Craisins as well. I'm a craisin fan, but you most certainly can. Just keep in mind, most raisins are sugar coated. So your scone is going to be a bit sweet. So perhaps if you add raisins, maybe you don't do the maple pre-glaze, you know? But I probably would, because I like sweet things. But you can absolutely add raisins, craisins, nuts. I mean, I had an idea to add some walnuts today. I went against it because I wanted to show you as similar to my original recipe as possible. But that's a great question. You absolutely can incorporate raisins. Just do it before you mold the scones and slice the scones. These are not cookies or muffins that you would sprinkle a streusel on prior to baking. You would have to really mold it in, especially with something as large as raisins. But it's a great question. Really great question. It's funny, I never really had raisins growing up, and then I tried craisins as a teenager. That was my first experience with craisins, and I became obsessed. It's a little bit about me. What about you? Are you a raisin or craisin person?
I like currants better than raisins because they're smaller and they disperse better. And when it comes to raisins, I've always preferred the golden ones to the purple ones.
Yeah, that's many people actually. Yeah, that's interesting. You know what? I don't know that I've ever had just currants as a snack, but now I'm kind of wanting to try it. Are they a little more sour, currants?
No, they're just like really tiny little dots, and you'd like they just, a lot of times you get disappointed because you get like a couple of raisins in one bite and then a bite of something where there's no raisins, but currants are so little they just kind of disperse better in the recipe. And you can get them. Even Sunmade makes them. Even the regular grocery store carries dried currants without sugar. It's in a Sunmade box.
Oh, okay. I'm going to try and find that next time I go to the grocery store.
Yeah.
What's funny is that I love grapes. I love red grapes. I love green grapes. But for some reason, I'm just not a raisin fan. And even in one of my recipes in the book in the kids section is ants on a log. And even writing, and that's not free. We use sun butter for Fern out there. And it's so funny creating that recipe. I really had to have taste testers for that. I think I actually asked my cousins and their children to try it out because I'm just so not a raisin person and I wouldn't know if it was delectable or not. And it is. It got 1 billion stars. Okay, so now I'm just going to show you how I would lift up the scone because I don't know how many times I've said it, but I'll say it again. The dough is very malleable. It can and it will probably the first time you make it fall apart on you. I hope it doesn't, but if it does, just know you can roll it and smush it and bake it like that. I'm using the knife. You can use a spatula, you can use a rubber spatula or plastic or metal. I'm using the knife because for me personally, with the way that the knife is shaped, it really helps me secure the scone. So I'm going to move this mug so I have more room. And I'm going from the middle of the scone. I cut these into, and I can recut it as well, but I cut these into 4 scones. And I'm going from the middle of one scone. I'm just reslicing it again. I'm going from the middle of one scone, almost at an angle, and just sliding the knife in. Because the last thing that you want is to break your scone. And I'm just slightly lifting the edge without ripping the parchment paper. That's probably the hardest one, the hardest part. And I'm just going around, lifting the edges. But for time's sake, maybe I should just show you exactly what I'm doing. You know what? For time's sake, I'm going to show you this way. This is what your dough should look like on your knife. Do you see that? Here, let me hold it that way. That's how I picked it up. And your oven is preheated already. Now, one option that you can do, which is something I also put in the book, is that you don't have to put your pre-baked glaze on before you place your scones on your baking sheet. You can lift your scones and put them on your baking sheet and then dip your finger and put the pre-baked glaze on. You do not have to do it here, but because I am teaching you something, I thought I would do it in this way. But it is all explained in the book. And then you bake it for 25 minutes. These scones, or these recipes, well, this one in particular, the bottom, it's beautifully golden, but the top doesn't really get very golden. So just make sure you set your timer and you follow your timer, because you don't want to overcook these. You know, burnt nuts and rice, it's not very tasty. It can be bitter. So make sure you set your cooking alarm to 25 minutes at 350 degrees. When you take them out, please use gloves. I can't tell you how many times I've had to remind people not to stick their bare hand in the oven. And when you take them out, let them sit for a bit. They are absolutely, you're definitely able to pick them up. One thing that's different between these and perhaps, you know, an all-purpose flour chocolate chip cookie is that these can be picked up right when you take them out of the oven. Try not to burn yourself though. I have a lot of scars from burnt fingers, not from not using gloves, but just from getting too excited and hungry. Something I love about this recipe is, one, that it's very versatile. You can use any tea, but for the flavor. But two, for me, I grew up with high tea. I love tea time. I love tea parties. I love Alice in Wonderland. And so I can have these scones in the morning for breakfast, as a snack. I can have them as a little lunch dessert, or I can have them as a dinner dessert. I can even have these as my lunch. I'm not kidding. They're just, it's a very simple and easy is the same thing, but very simple and yummy and healthy alternative to, I don't know, brownies. You know, not to say that I don't love brownies. Actually, in this book, I do have our plant-based brownies. They're actually half brownie, half cacao chocolate chip cookie. I call them brookies, brownie and cookies. They are marvelous. So, and I'm not knocking chocolate. I love chocolate. I'm not knocking brownies. I love brownies. And I'm not knocking cookies. I love cookies. I'm just saying, if you wake up in the morning and you just want something easy and you have a little bit of time, just remember this whole recipe doesn't take as long as it does for me explaining it. I'm just trying to get you on the same page with me. You can whisk very quickly, and 25 minutes in the oven. Let it sit for about 5 minutes, and bada bing, bada boom, you got delicious plant-based scones.
Right. Deborah says, I'm wondering, are they crunchy or soft? And another viewer wanted to know if they can be frozen.
Excellent question. Questions. Okay, first one, Deborah. Was your name? I hope it is Deborah. I'm sorry.
Yeah, and Barb wanted to know if you could break one open so they could see the texture inside.
I absolutely can. I'm going to make this for you. So, no, I'm not, because I have my recipe. So you would think that these are flaky, or not flaky, that's the wrong word. You would think because of the brown rice that they just fall apart and they're dry. Not at all. They are crispy on the outside and soft on the inside. I'm going to come in front of you, or in front of my little area. I'm going to break it open. Look at that. This is not slow-mo, guys. This is real time. So it's crunchy, if you can hear that, on the outside, but soft on the inside. And here, I'll hold it up. Do you hear that? So it's crunchy on the outside, but very soft. I mean, look at that break. Very soft on the inside. And I top mine with raspberry preserves or strawberry preserves. I know for tea time, you're used to clotted cream. We don't have clotted cream because it is cream and it's not plant-based. but they're delicious with, you know, tea if you want more tea, or hot cocoa, and some preserves. And then the second question was, can they be frozen? Absolutely they can. So if you put them in the refrigerator 2 to 3 days in a Ziploc bag or a container, a covered container, in the freezer, you can freeze these for up to 2 weeks. I mean, one thing what I wouldn't do is put your dough in the freezer unbaked. You can put your dough in the refrigerator if you bake it, you know, today, right now with me, and you're like, oh, I have to run out. Oh, this is terrible. Okay, I'm gonna go out and I'm gonna put this away. Make sure it's covered. You wanna seal in that moisture, not in a Ziploc bag. That's gonna be a little difficult. Put it in, you know, your Tupperware, cover it, make sure it's very, very covered and really sealed, not just with a paper towel or tin foil. That can be in your refrigerator for 48 hours. I would say after 24 hours, readjust, go in there, see how it's doing. I mean, I don't know. Depends what you set your refrigerator at. But if anything, the cold will help and it'll make it stick more. So you may have bigger scones if you put your dough in the refrigerator for a bit. Personally, I'm always in a rush, so I want to bake the goods and then eat it right away. But that's an excellent question, and you can definitely put these in the refrigerator, baked or unbaked.
Great. And Barb says, can you bake them on the parchment paper that they're rolled on?
You absolutely can, but it will be a lot more difficult for you. I've done that, and you definitely can. Just keep in mind, you will have to have a very large baking sheet so that you can spread the parchment paper out. And then when you slice the scones, make sure they're not touching, because we're not using all-purpose flour and eggs. So we have to manually spread out these scones. So you absolutely can use the parchment paper. Just make sure that you slice the scones and spread them out. They don't expand, so that's not the worry. But if they bake touching each other, they will come out of the oven touching each other. So just spread them out, but you absolutely can. Just keep in mind, you're going to be doing all of the heavy lifting on one pan, but you definitely can do it. I mean, props to you. Go crazy. These are your scones. I'm just here to teach.
Nice, nice. Well, this has been great. You know, I'm surprised that nobody put this in a chat yet, because they always want to know, all the guests, what they eat in a day.
Ooh, okay. Well, I will tell, I told you guys at the beginning that I am obsessed with coffee. However, I cannot have coconut milk or almond milk. Coconut, just for me, the taste doesn't, I don't know, I don't love it. Almond milk gives me a little film on the top of my throat, so that may have been TMI. But oat milk is what I put in my coffee. I do black coffee with a dash of oat milk and maple syrup. So funny enough, growing up in New York, I'm from New York, I'm from Manhattan, and I'm from Long Island in Manhattan. And my parents use a crazy amount of sweet and low in their coffee with half and half. And it's very funny when I come home and I'm like, oat milk and maple syrup? Do we have any of that? So that's what I start my morning with. I actually try to convince my fiance, which I'm still working on. We may or may not be putting in a 1-cup coffee pot in our bedroom so that I can wake up and instantly have the coffee. That's how addicted to coffee I am. It's not okay, but it's also amazing. So I start with that, and I have a cup of coffee. And then I'll have some watermelon, or what I love to do if you're not allergic to nuts is I slice a Granny Smith apple. I love sour apples with peanut butter. You can use almond butter. Personally, peanut butter is just my thing. I love it. Crunchy or smooth. And that's my breakfast. For lunch, I'll have a banana and I'll have a salad, depending. I mean, if I have leftovers from the night before, I'll probably eat like my zoodles from the night before. I like a hefty lunch. I know normally you're supposed to have a hefty dinner. I like a very hefty lunch. So if I have a salad, it'll have falafel in it, or it'll have something, or tofu. It'll have something that will keep me grounded and not hungry, like not starving until dinner time. So I usually have a banana or two. Honestly, I've had 2 bananas in one sitting. You cannot make fun of a person for that. If you're running around, it's a big thing. And I have about 5 bananas in the corner, and you best bet when we're done, I'm having another one today. But yeah, a salad. And we actually have many dressings in this cookbook, because normally when you go to a restaurant, their dressings are not vegan. There maybe the ingredients in the salad are vegan, but you'd be surprised. I mean, most Caesars have an egg yolk, cream, milk. So we have many plant-based sauces and dressings in this cookbook. And that's usually what I eat for lunch. And then at night, dinner time, I am obsessed with green beans. So lately I've been on this kick where I mix green beans, asparagus, broccoli, and Brussels sprouts all in one very large pot. I mean, I can show you, it's like this big. It was from our registry. Someone got it for us. Thank you. And I have been drizzling it with lemon juice. I know what you're thinking, that, how can you saute vegetables without olive oil? It's 100% possible. Lemon juice is a great alternative to olive oil when it comes to sauteing. I am not saying that you should, replace, if you're not plant-based, I'm not saying you should replace olive oil with lemon juice when you're baking something, but if you're sauteing vegetables, lemon juice is a great alternative. It's not overly pungent or it's not too sour. You don't need that much. Also, if you're making anything that has white onions, if you steam white onions on their own, they produce their own oil. So you should start off by doing that, and then you'll have just a little bit of the onion oil, and just add the rest of your veggies. Very simple. You could actually make onion pasta. It's a thing. I've seen it. I've had it. It can be very yummy. But that's what I've been doing at night. And brown rice, I've been making different versions of my brown rice. Sometimes I'll do carrots and peas. Sometimes I'll do mushrooms. I have my entire spice rack here, and I use a lot of turmeric and ginger in my rice. It just gives it that extra oomph. And people are kind of afraid to spice their rice. That's fun. It rhymes. But I say go crazy until it gets a little too crazy. I can't tell you the amount of times where I've just taken everything on my spice rack and added it. One thing that I will say, if you like more of a risotto rice, you can try adding nutritional yeast. It tastes a little bit like cheese, and when melted or when mixed, it can give sort of a creamy texture. I do that sometimes for Scott, but that is my, oh, and I will say, if I work out that day, which I did not today, forgive me, I will usually have a smoothie afterwards, which consists of peanut butter. You can use almond butter or sunflower butter, but peanut butter, banana, strawberries sometimes, depending on how I'm feeling, and spinach. And that's it. Sometimes you can add oat milk if you want. I don't always need it because the banana is so creamy. But if you want it a little thinner and not a thick smoothie, add some oat milk. A 4th cup won't hurt anybody.
Nice. Well, I like that you said you eat a big lunch, because I host a summit, the screen's behind me, called The Truth About Weight Loss. And that's what all the research is showing, is we should make lunch the biggest meal of the day. Well, this has been so much fun, Ashley. Thank you so much for sharing your easy and delicious recipe. Other than getting the book, which I'm posting the link for, is there a way for people to support you or follow you?
Absolutely. Come say hi to me and follow me on Instagram. That's Ashley's Kitchen. It's at That's Ashley's Kitchen. My name is Ashley Arpel Greenwald. If you type that in, you'll also find That's Ashley's Kitchen. And I post recipes. I do some videos of my own, and you can see a lot of the food that I photograph and where I go to get plant-based meals wherever I am, whether I'm traveling or here at home in LA. So and you can see me plan my wedding.
Nice. Well, I look forward to that. Well, it was such a pleasure meeting you. Thank you so much for the wonderful presentation. And thanks all of you for watching another episode of Chef AJ Live. Please come back tomorrow when our guests are Leif and Anders. They are known as the Vegan Gym Brother, and they have a story of recovering from cancer. Thanks again, Ashley. It was great to meet you. Take care.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.